You're watching EVH Gear TV. Official Van Halen merchandise for EVH Gear TV is provided by VanHalenStore.com. Now, here's your host from Ontario, Canada, EVH Gear artist Eric Broadbent.
Hey everyone, happy Friday evening. It is finally Friday. It seems like another long week, but we're here. It's Friday evening, 9 p.m., and it's time for EVH Gear TV. I'm very, very excited to have Dan Alvarez, producer-composer, joining me on the show for the evening, and looking forward to talking some great stuff from your career, talking a little bit about Jason Becker's album update and a bunch of other things. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I actually was just over at Jason's house a couple hours ago.
Good.
So doing great, and we're moving right along.
Good. There's a lot of people excited about that record. Obviously, you're deeply invested in that project, but we're looking forward to that for sure. And we'll talk about that later on in the evening. But a bunch of people jumping in the chat. I'm just going to say hi to them very quickly, and we're going to get right into the program if that's cool with you.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Good to have you, man. So we got James joining us from Ottawa, Ben Nashitaka saying howdy. Let me see here. Caesar Bazzi, Mark Taylor, Joseph Burt, Scott MacArthur, Lau Ketchum, Frank McNeil's joining us. Les Bellin. I didn't say you yet. Les Bellin. Mike Ray, my beautiful Poison Ivy Gross here is assisting here in the chat. Frank McNeil. Let me see here. Ben Nakatasha and Michael Bishop is joining us. So I'm going to just highlight where we left off there. And let's get right into the questions. A bunch of questions I have for you, and I'll also ask you throughout the evening as well, too, as questions come in the chat. Lately, I've been discovering this pattern. Now, I started a little bit late with music. I got into music when I was a teenager, but I've seen a lot of my guests saying they're getting into, they started early, and you started quite early at the age of 6. Is that correct?
Well, that's when I first had lessons. I mean,
okay.
My mom was taking piano lessons at the time, and I used to come up to the piano and kind of blink out by ear what I was hearing her. And she said, I think maybe you should be the one taking lessons. So, and it turned out that the next door neighbor was a piano teacher. So
that's good.
Yeah, so that worked out pretty well. So I started taking piano lessons. Yeah, about at the age of 6, and then I continued. I guess until I was about 8, and then I picked up the violin because my mother wanted me to play some instrument in an orchestra and go to school and get out of her hair. So, so I chose the violin, and I was pretty good at it. I mean, I played that up until I was about 13, but it just wasn't. You get into junior high, and it was brutal, and that wasn't cool anymore. So I went back to the piano. I started playing keyboards and rock bands and things like that. So
yeah, the cool factor is that thing is you go to show your friends, maybe you can play some really cool classical piece to your friends, and I mean it might be a technical wizardry, but they're kind of like and then you play some Van Halen or some Rush or something like that. Oh yeah, that's cool, right? Probably nowhere near as hard, but
I ended up doing Rush covers actually in some of these bands. Doing I was of course. When you're in a Rush cover band as a keyboard player, you're not doing very much.
True.
But at least I was there.
Yeah, that's cool. It's got a cool factor to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right on.
I played in rock bands when I was in high school, and I went back to the piano and taking piano lessons at the same time. So I kept doing that, and basically, although I took a short hiatus to study electrical engineering. Which only lasted about 6 months. And then I went back to college and studied piano in college, piano and composition. So I really had piano lessons almost continuously from the time I was 6 until I was in my mid-20s.
Wow. A lot of schooling for sure. Was any of your friends growing up, like the younger kids in the neighborhood, stuff like that, were they kind of pursuing music? Did you have any kind of that camaraderie with your buddies playing guitar or drums?
I started. I mean, it was almost comical, but I had these little bands when I was 11, 12 years old, and it was whatever instruments people played. I mean, I remember I had one band that was piano, bass, and trombone. Trying to play. I remember we used to play Godzilla by Blue Oyster Cult with that instrumentation, and it didn't really work very well.
Oh yeah, that seems a little odd. Yeah.
But it was fun. I had a tremendous amount of fun. Then it became more standard rock instrumentation after that, and I was in, I don't know, many different bands. And in fact, a couple of the people went on to have careers. I mean, I played in a band when I was in high school with the bass player who ultimately became the bass player for the Counting Crows.
Oh, wow.
Matt Malley, and he went on to quite success in that band. But and I worked. There was some very talented friends that I had. But people go on to different things in life.
That's right.
That was crazy enough and stubborn enough to remain in the music business.
Well, the cool thing is, though, I mean, I'm sure if you talk to your friends today, you talk about him playing with Counting Crows and whatnot. I mean, he's going to say the same thing. Oh, and my friend Dan went on to be, an illustrious composer, and so I'm sure he says the same thing. It's just a different avenue.
It is. I mean, it's funny. People take all these different directions in life, and there's so many directions even within the career of music. So I mean, there are people that became teachers, and people that went on to rock bands, people that went on to do. Film scoring, things like that. So
exactly, there's nothing wrong with being behind the board. I mean, in a lot of cases, a little safer. You're not wear and tear. You're not on the road away from your family. You can be kind of closer to home.
Well, that was my feeling. Is after back in that day. I mean, we used to play. When I was in high school and early college, these bands, and we'd play in these grimy clubs around San Francisco. And frankly, part of it was that at that time, the cigarette smoke kind of got to me, because at that time there was no laws against it. And, and I just thought to myself, I mean, this is tiring, and I'm lugging all these keyboards around. And I thought, when I got by the time I got back to college, studying music, a friend of a friend was running one of these small 8-track studios, which was, back then was tape. And he saw me as this young aspirational kid. And so he said, why don't you come in and learn the equipment? And if you learn it well enough, you can actually run sessions for me,
Nice.
And so that's what happened. And so I learned kind of by doing the whole, the technology part of it. I never really studied that. I mean, technically I was an electrical engineering student, but it really only lasted a semester. So I was really just taking math classes and physics classes. So the technology part of it, I completely learned by doing. I never went to school to learn any of that, and but it was all learning by doing. And then I ended up working in this 8-track studio, and then I ended up working for. This was all during college. I think during college, I don't know when I slept, but because I was in school full time and doing these full-time studio gigs. But I was in the 8-track studio, I was doing also keyboard session work. So
okay,
I was
nice.
working. But then I started working for a guy who had a multi-million-dollar studio, big state-of-the-art studio in his house, and he had done a lot of work with Michael Jackson.
Oh, nice.
And was doing film scoring with them, and that was really interesting to me. And then there was this big elaborate mixing console. I'd gone from this really dinky little studio to this state of the art thing. So there was another learning curve I had to attack, and it took a while. But by the time I spent 4 years there, and by the time I was done, I really knew what I was doing as far as all the engineering side of things and the production side of things.
Sometimes being thrown into the mix is like you sink or swim, right? And in this case, you've done pretty well.
Yeah. So that was learning by doing. But the music, was I had a lot of music schooling. So
how about the parents? How much did they have as an influence? And obviously, you kind of joked about it. Your mom says get a violin, go tour with the orchestra, and you're on the road. But I mean, how much were they a catalyst in where you are today?
Yeah, my parents really weren't that musical. I mean, my grandparents were, interestingly, but both of my grandmothers were exceptionally talented. One of them published music, and the other one was a church organist, starting at the age of 10. So they were both just phenomenally talented. But my parents really didn't do music at all. My dad he could pick up my violin and poke around on it and not sound too bad.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a little bit of talent, but
as far as pushing you though, like, or encouraging me, like, I mean, sometimes you don't have to have the talent, but
I pursued music in spite of them. My mom was kind enough to get me to piano lessons and things like that. But I don't think my dad was all like, he was a physicist, and I think he wanted me to be more on the science and engineering side. Probably that's the reason why I went to engineering school for a while. But
sure, make Dad happy.
But I did inherit some of the sort of technical interest. I mean, I got really interested in synthesizers and things like that when I was an early teenager. And in fact, I think one summer I built a synthesizer. I got a kit while everybody else was out playing baseball. I was downstairs with my soldering iron all summer long building one. Yeah. So and I mean, it wasn't that great, but I had a hell of a lot of fun with it.
Do you still have it?
And I wish I did. I sold it, only a couple of years later, and I kept trading up. I kept paper routes, and ended up getting bigger and better synthesizers and keyboards all throughout high school and so on.
Okay.
So that was a it's just like, I'm sure it's the same with guitars. Well, you get one guitar, now you gotta have this one, and now you get this little amp, now you need a bigger one.
That's right.
So it was the same thing for me.
I'll take a little slight right turn because that actually is a question I have later on in the itinerary, but I'll ask it right now because it's pertinent. With us as guitar players, we're kind of gifted in a way that technology doesn't change too much. Now, before people freak and say, yes, it does, you're using things with apps and Bluetooth and things like that. The
right.
typical Les Paul or a Strat style guitar,
right.
Your typical Marshall style amplifier, tube amplifier, and a couple pedals. It's all the same. It changes a little bit. Some gets better, that kind of thing. But with keyboards, I mean, that's one thing why I'm glad I never got into keyboards. But for you've seen everything change, and that's a question I'm going to ask you. Tell us a little bit about the humble beginnings, starting with some of not only the keyboards that you've had growing up as a kid and as an adult, and the computers. Like I watched some of the things that you've been talking about as far as the old Commodore 64s and the old Apples and things like that. Tell us a little bit about both sides of that fence and how it's kind of been maybe a blessing and a nightmare for you over the years.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I really kind of started coming into music as a career, roughly around the age of 20. Well, I started doing session work in studios. I think I was 17 when I did my first recording session in a studio, but I was about 20 years old when I was actually working in studios, and engineering and so forth, and it was really an inflection point because it was right around that time that computers started to enter the scene and be of assistance in making music. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, you could, I guess, somewhere in the 1980, early 1980s is basically the time when you could start to use computers to aid in composition and to be able to build songs, right, without having a studio, mm-hmm. without having a band. I mean, prior to that, there were very few artists that would just go in a studio, and I guess Stevie Winwood kind of did that, but there weren't very many people that. It was a very difficult process to just go in the studio and do everything yourself. Okay?
Right.
Once computers started entering the scene, not only did that happen, but you had drum machines, you had computer sequencers. It influenced music. I mean, the early and mid '80s had particularly I think in pop music. This was not really true as much on the rock side of things, but in sort of mainstream pop music. I mean, it had a tremendous influence on the sound. I mean, the comical, apotheosis of this is that I was asked by someone who had done a demo with a real drummer, and he said, "Can you replace the drummer with a drum machine?" Because he wanted that sound of the '80s, and I thought, and it occurred to me, years later, people would think you're crazy for doing that now,
Yeah.
But at the time, it was just part of the sound, because it's like anything else. It's like, when people first had color film, they went crazy with color film and did all kinds of gaudy shit with it. But
because they could,
and it was the same thing in that early 1980s period. It had this effect on music. You could maybe say it was a kind of sterilized period. It was a very synthetic period, and then the only thing, very often the only thing that was human was the singer.
Yeah.
So and it rubbed off in a lot of even bands that were guitar centric. You could hear some of the influence in Rush. You could hear some of the influence in the Police. In even I guess Eddie played his own keyboard parts, but at least some of the sounds. So so I started my career in the music business right when that was starting to happen, and so I, like everybody else, went crazy with it, and was able to do things at home. So when I'd have different keyboards, I could actually build arrangements. Of course, the technology. I started with this little Commodore 64 computer. The technology was terrible. It was buggy. I'd write something, and then play it back, and like the last note would be stuck on, and things like that. Or, would you be putting floppy disks in or trying to store things on cassette tape, and half the time it wouldn't work.
They're horrible, yeah.
But it was intriguing, and it was all moving really fast, and within just a few years, basically within a 10-year period, you had things like ADAT machines, and so there was this very short period of time relative to the history of the music business where you went from having to spend a lot of money in a recording studio to being able to do all this stuff
at home.
And I sort of came of age through all of that, and in the early part of my career, it was really fascinating to see it all develop. So
that's nice, actually, the fact that you were in it from the get-go. Some people will just jump in on something because it's a hot button, right? But you were there kind of before the computer equipment come in, obviously deeply rooted in it. The computer equipment comes in now. It's a tool to you. You embraced it, and you learned it. That's the thing. Some people just can't do that. There's like this little wave that comes in. If you can't get involved in, or you can't get on that wave, you're either drowned or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. No, you're very lucky to have done that, and I definitely don't envy the keyboard players, because you see the technology change, and you see things. You spend thousands of dollars on a board, multiple thousands of dollars, and then a couple of years, it just seems like keyboard equipment, like it ages 10 times faster than a guitar.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I sometimes, I wish the guitar is a really. It's funny. I mean, the guitar is such an inscrutable instrument to me. I don't know if you can see in the back. Those are a couple of guitars that Jason gave me. And, he used to own, and I picked them up from time to time, and I've used them. And I mean, I can play, just a little, enough to be bad, enough to be able to do simple things that I need to do on my music.
Yeah, exactly. Get it down on tape and whatever.
But it's, the guitar has always been confusing to me, because I'm used to this sort of, I'm used to these sort of evenly spaced intervals. You've got, on the guitar, you've got, a fourth, a fourth, a fourth, fourth, third. Where's that come from?
Yeah.
Like, why is this third here? I get confused, and it's so people can play a variety of different chords, that makes sense for those 6 strings.
Yeah.
But it has never ceased to confuse me, as hard as I've tried. So I just kind of piddle around with it. But I'm so fortunate to be surrounded with so many amazing guitar players, so I don't need to play it.
That's right. You can always pick up little things. I think for some people that maybe don't get to what you're saying is, in layman's terms, you could say the guitar, it's almost like, if you have your GPS, like your Google Maps, whatever, on your phone, you can get from point A to point B, and you'll be safe and sound. But on the keyboard, you can take your back roads, and it like with your eyes closed.
Yeah. Well, it's just always consistent,
Yeah.
And guitar has this. at least the way it's normally tuned, has this one anomaly in it, from my perspective, which has never quite made sense to me. But anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Well, obviously, I know when you're growing up taking lessons, everyone is trained in the classical realm. That's what we're all forced upon. That's the staple learning. But let's branch away from that a little bit. Let's talk. You talked about some of the rock bands like Rush and stuff like that. Who are some of your influences outside of classical when you were approaching the keyboard?
Well, from a keyboard standpoint, the funny thing is that even notwithstanding everything I just said about the guitar, there are many guitarists that were a huge influence on me. I might go so far as to say that even though he wasn't a keyboard player, Steve Morse might have been the single biggest influence on me.
Wow.
I used to just listen to the Dixie Dregs at that time, which was just daily, when I was in high school. And I just thought he was the most amazing thing since sliced bread. That said, there were a lot of other keyboard players. Keith Emerson, of course. If you're no self-respecting rock keyboard player can fail to mention him.
Of course.
So it's such a shame what happened to him. Taking his own life a year ago. I actually ran into him in of all places, just randomly in Santa Monica. I walked into a coffee house
and saw him.
There he was, and I said, I've got to introduce myself. So
That's
it was
great.
nice. I got to meet him just purely by chance. And then Rick Wakeman, of course, and Tony Banks from Genesis. He was a big influence on me as well. He had a really interesting way of using chords and harmonic structure, that I always admired. And but there were David Page from Toto, Elton John, of course. There are these sort of two lines, because I think when you're a keyboard player in rock, there's a tendency to sort of gravitate to the prog rock thing because more featured over there.
Cool.
So I had a whole prog rock phase, and I still love a lot of that stuff. But then on the other side is like, the Elton Johns and the Leon Russells and
Billy Joel at all or anything like that?
Billy Joel, sure. Yeah. I really liked all those guys. They all had something to offer, and
For sure.
got bits and pieces from them all,
I like the fact that you brought up Steve Morse for sure, because I like him a lot. I think he's phenomenal. Do you and Jason ever have that conversation about Steve Morse? I could see Jason appreciating him too.
Not only do we have a conversation about it, but I have to tell you, I'm here to tell you, he is on the record.
Oh man, fantastic! You know what?
I know who's on the record?
Yeah, that is amazing. Now I knew there were some names. That's great.
I know everybody wants to know who's on the record, but and I some of these people are not
confirmed.
So I'll tell you the people who are for sure.
Okay.
So we've got Steve, Alex Sever, Jeff Loomis,
nice,
Joe Bonamassa,
oh man,
Uli Roth, Richie Kotzen, Marty Friedman, Michael Lee Firkins, Joe Satriani, Neil Sean, and Jude Gold. That is, so far,
wow.
We think Steve Vai, and we think Trevor Rabin from Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty good list.
That is an awesome list. That is absolutely incredible. I knew there were some names, and I heard a couple of those names. I didn't hear all the ones that you were saying, so absolutely phenomenal. And if people don't know what we're talking about, this is the new upcoming album, not yet titled, that you're working strictly with Jason. So let's step back a few steps. So this is great. This is going in a great direction. So you've been working with Jason for around 25 years approximately. Tell us how you got involved with Jason. Tell us about the first couple projects, and then we'll catch back up to here.
So when that bigger studio that I was referring to earlier, the guy that had done the work for Michael Jackson, I was there for about 4 years, and I had kind of moved on. I started to do TV scoring. That was another thing that I got into. So I was kind of busy doing that, but the guy that ran that studio called me one day and said, "There's somebody I think you should meet and should probably work with." because we're doing this project here, and I think it's a good fit for you. And I didn't know who Jason was. It's not, and it's kind of embarrassing because I should have, because I was certainly a Van Halen fan, and I knew that Steve Vai had been in David Lee Roth, but I didn't know who Jason was.
Yeah.
And so he played me these demos, of this crazy classical music. There was a demo for End of the Beginning, a demo for Life and Death, which were both ended up on Perspective. And he had done all this with just a little tiny synth module. And I thought, wow, this guy's really talented. And then he said, but, there's something special about this kid. He's got this disease. And then I learned the whole story, and it was just amazing. And I said, well, I've got to do this.
Of course.
And so it went from there. I met with them and started in on it. And it was, at that time, there were a lot of things to get that record done under those circumstances. First of all, there was no internet. Well, there was effectively no internet at that time.
Right.
It was right before this whole internet explosion, just a couple of years before that. And so it wasn't like I could, and really Jason couldn't come to the studio. He came to the studio a couple of times, but it was a huge journey for him. And so down all these stairs. So I sat in the studio working alone for much of that project. There were a couple things that had already been done. Meet Me in the Morning was essentially already done.
Okay.
But pretty much everything else we took from start to finish, and I just sat for about a year and a half, putting that record together, and then would make progress on it, and then I'd have to mix it to a DAT tape, and mail it to Jason, or maybe I'd take it over there. I don't remember, but basically it wasn't like couldn't send an MP3 back and forth.
Oh, we're talking at least a day minimum.
Exactly. So it was painstaking. And not only, it was painstaking. A lot of the things I'm doing now, for example, on this record, this new record, there's a lot of orchestral stuff, and the technology to mock that up is so much better and so much easier. I would to do something like End of the Beginning was unbelievably painstaking work. I sat for weeks and weeks and weeks just doing strings on that, and trying to invent techniques to make the strings sound more realistic. When the technology I had for that back then was really
limited, very limited,
and it was I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but the result, the result was worth it. That's what I'll say.
Now, how was Jason getting it to you? Like, you can explain, because I know how he's evolved over the years with the way he's able to communicate with the compositions and whatnot. But explain how you'd receive some of these ideas that he had. Yeah,
well, I had a lot of it was, some of it was MIDI demos.
Okay,
right. I had he had done all the compositions with, the different categories. So some Life and Death and End of the Beginning were these kind of orchestral pieces, and so I got the MIDI for that, and so I took the MIDI and I sort of rearranged it for the orchestra stuff that I had to work with, and split it all apart, and just rearranged it all so it would work with the sounds and the equipment that I had. So I had essentially all of the compositional material was all laid out for me in there. In those two cases, there were other things like Primal. So, for example, Primal was about half done because the drums had already been recorded, and the guitar had already been recorded. But we added some flute, some other sounds. We added some flutes. We added a singer, recorded a lead singer, and so it was a little bit of a combination. If I added a few things of my own, and then that was relatively simpler to do than some of the other ones. Rain was an interesting one because all we had on Rain was Jason's guitar. He'd recorded, this on one of those old multi-track cassette things.
Yeah, like a Tascam or a Fostex or something like that.
Right. And he had recorded his guitar part, and then he had a very simple keyboard part on one other track. So I took his guitar part and I literally put it into a sampler, and so every phrase, because I didn't have to, I actually did that at home because every phrase was on a key, so I'd play one key and it would be the first phrase. That way I had control over how far apart the different phrases were.
Nice.
And I could spread that out a little bit, and then I just built this whole arrangement around it. So that was Rain. So that was all done with Jason's basic guitar, and then I created a big keyboard arrangement around that. So I mean, and then another one is Blue. I mean, that was pretty much done. Jason had recorded his guitar part, which is just this amazing Stevie Ray Vaughan type of thing, And all we needed to do on that was we brought a hand percussionist in. So that's kind of Blue is kind of interesting because it doesn't have drums on it per se. It has
djembe or something, or
percussion, right?
Yeah.
And then I just added some organ.
Nice.
And bass, and that's it. And that was Blue. So there was a whole range on perspective. But the really painstaking stuff was the orchestral stuff.
Yeah.
Because it took so long to do all those strings in using samples at that time with the what was fairly primitive technology at the time.
What you're hearing in your head is just not coming out in the actual voice that you want it to be.
Yeah, I mean and I had to. I mean, if I were to do it now, it would take me a third or fourth of the amount of time that it did back then.
Yeah, just because the instruments are beautiful, you real voicings, real recordings, wherever you want to play it on the keyboard, it's there.
And then, of course, Michael Lee Firkins came in and, knocked that one out of the park. I mean, that was just such a joy, to get that on there.
Yeah.
He's such a phenomenal player. And so that one really, I have to say I'm quite proud of how that came out, in the beginning.
So with the new record now too, so we're at, Jason and possibly you, I'm not sure who set up the crowdfunding for it, but there's a crowdfunding initiative out there, Indiegogo, and actually I have the link to it in the description of this video if people want to look into it and possibly contribute to it. And it's funded already, but I assume you're still taking funding for that and support, right?
Absolutely, and it all helps. We'll say that the government has taken their fair share of it as well.
Yeah, yeah. And then the organization probably takes a percentage.
If nobody in the audience realized this, money has a way of disappearing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it really is being put to good use.
That's good.
We have made really, really great progress on the record. We have a ways to
go yet. What are the mediums that you're thinking of releasing? Will it be in multiple formats, digital download, CDs, vinyl?
I'm not sure about. I mean, vinyl it would be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I have to talk to Jason about it. I'm not sure what the story is.
Obviously, that's further down the road yet, but
obviously CDs and digital downloads. All the normal stuff, iTunes and so forth. I think it would be wonderful to do a vinyl, but we'll see.
Yeah, of course.
That remains that's an unanswered question at this point.
Now, excuse my ignorance on here, on my end of it here too, but do you have to mix differently yourself? Like if let's say Jason says, yes, we want to do a vinyl version as well. Are you going to mix it a little differently for that?
I think that's really just I think that's a mastering issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Strictly in the mastering process.
Yeah, it might be mastered. There's some things you have to do a little differently in terms of the EQ curve to make sure that a vinyl record. The other thing is, right now it looks like we're going to have about a 60-minute CD, and
nice.
vinyl
You'd have to you'd almost get into 2 records.
Yeah, I think you got to stop around 40, 45 minutes with vinyl. I'm not sure. Something. So we might have to, if we do vinyl, we'll have to leave something off probably.
Yeah. There you go. Without becoming a double LP or all the logistics that come along with that. Yeah. Well, I know obviously, I know Jason's a Van Halen fan. Like a lot of any guitar player pretty much on the planet is, a fan of Eddie Van Halen. And obviously, guitar is not your forefront instrument, but obviously Van Halen affected all of us differently. Whether we're guitar players, not even some of us, not even musicians, just individuals. What was it like the first time you ever heard a Van Halen track come on your FM dial? And
oh my God! And the thing, it's like I was right. I think I was 13 years old.
Okay.
When Van Halen won, and I think it was either Running with the Devil or You Really Got Me.
Yeah, getting a lot of rotation back then.
First time that came on the radio was just holy. I mean, what is that? And it was so different than anything I'd ever heard. To hear that for the first time, that was really. I tell you, it made it. Even not as a guitarist, but it made such an impact on me. That whole album, was incredible. And I of course went out and bought it and played it, until the needle wore.
Yeah. Yeah, like we all do. Yeah, go back and buy it again at the the local shop.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, well, yeah. At that time, it was vinyl. That was it.
Strictly, that's it.
And there's something, it's not that I'm not one of these people who has this fetish for vinyl, because I obviously I like the convenience of the iTunes and the CDs, but I will say that there is something about vinyl being a multi-sensory. It was a multi-sensory experience.
It is.
That I think a lot of people, especially young people, are kind of deprived of in a way because you were using all your senses. You're
storytelling. You're making up a story as you're.
Actual thing of you'd put the record on, take it out of the sleeve. You'd have a smell to it. And obviously, reading it, looking at the pictures, seeing the credits, and so forth, and that it sort of would get burned into your brain, and so it really with that multi-sensory experience. I don't know if there's any. You can obviously music videos replace some of the visual components of that, but. I don't know. There was something about the physical act of putting it on, and it was just this whole ritual.
That's right.
Down and and do that, and I obviously I had a few years of that, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. On the other hand, sadly I don't think I've played a vinyl record. I don't even have a record player anymore.
Yeah.
It's partly
It's convenience factor. It is convenience factor.
I hate to admit this, but also, people ask me, well, what do you listen to? And I say, well, if you worked at a newspaper all day, what's the one thing you don't want to do when you get home?
You read the news. That's very read. Period.
So the sort of bittersweet thing about my job, I guess I could say, is that. I spend so long every day working on music that I don't really very often listen to music just for pleasure,
Yeah, you need a release of that for sure.
Yeah, but I do. I don't want to exaggerate the point, but it happens. If I take some time off of work, then very often I'll find myself wanting to listen to music again. But there's just a saturation that happens when you're just sitting there, and especially the repetition, What I do is listen to something thousands of times, not just thousands of times, in the long term, but over the course of a day, I might play the same 8 bars, 100 times.
Yeah.
Because I'm, and so it's just, you just want to have peace and quiet after that. I'll go out on the back patio and have some coffee and just
chill.
listen to the birds.
Yes. Nature's music. Yeah.
So,
That's the thing. I can see it easily affecting you in a positive way, in a good way, and the negative way is the fact that, okay, you don't turn the music off and you go listen to XYZ bands, whatever, and all of a sudden one of your next compositions is like, okay, I was listening to this band a little too much because it actually sounds like them without even meaning it. You know what I mean? So you do need to.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean that first Van Halen record was really, I'd have to say, that it was such a seminal thing. It just changed. It changed so much about how guitar players thought about the guitar.
I agree. Yeah,
and nothing was really quite the same after that. I guess in some way, sort of like Chuck Berry had done, and maybe Jimi Hendrix. It took me a long time to appreciate Jimi Hendrix too.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. Maybe because I wasn't a guitar player, but it wasn't until really just a few years ago that I really started to appreciate what Jimmy had done. And how amazing he was.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Jimi Hendrix because I almost had something slip my mind for a second, and I want to ask you about this because you and I are pretty much of the close age, a very similar age, so we come from the same era. So you talked about not having records right now. Do you ever remember the format CD and G? Do you remember that? CD and graphics?
Vaguely, yeah.
They were and I'm not talking Laserdisc. I'm talking literally regular CDs, but they would say CD plus G.
But lasted about 2 months or something?
Yeah, at the best. And I had a Jimi Hendrix one. I had the only one I ever had. And you had to find, this is when the home DVD players, and we didn't have Blu-ray then. It was just DVD players, but certain ones could play this format, CD plus G. And you'd go to any record store and you'd say, do you have any CD plus G? And they would look at you like you just asked for like a tab or some kind of Fresca or something, or whatever. But I got a Jimi Hendrix one, and it was absolutely horrid. It was just like, I think it was the RU Experience, which is great music. But it had like kaleidoscopes, anything you'd expect if you close your eyes and listen to Jimi Hendrix. Well, that's what they showed you on the screen. But it was a pretty cool limited technology, and I'm sure there's a few CDs out there. Yeah, people have to look it up. CD plus G.
Yeah, there was the video Laserdisc. That was another.
That came after, yeah.
And then there was what was Sony's format that kind of died?
The Beta.
It was more, no, the high fidelity discs.
Oh, I'm not sure.
It'll come to me.
Okay.
But anyway,
the DVD HD.
No.
This is before that then. So we had Laserdisc and then.
No, this was only audio. It
was
high fidelity audio.
Okay.
Somebody's going to come out and tell me what.
Yeah, let me know in the chat, guys, if you know it.
But anyway, the other thing is that early CDs, there were all kinds of audio problems with those things as well because the technology used to capture and play back had, let's just say, there were some technical problems that made them sound people used to say they sound really thin, and that digital sounds thin and it doesn't sound warm like analog.
Right.
And of course the truth is that it isn't necessarily the core technology that's the problem. It was the implementation in most cases that led people to that conclusion.
Yeah.
Now most of that is just completely eliminated.
Yes.
And, but so this a lot of these arguments about CDs sound vinyls sound better than CDs. I don't like to get into that argument, but I certainly, as I said, I can understand that the ritual and the multi-sensory experience of playing a vinyl. I have no problem that if somebody enjoys that, but I think I'm not sure about the whole debate now, and I'm talking about now with current technology. Not in 1985.
No, exactly.
But that I think so. I think much of the difference has between just in terms of pure audio quality has been overblown.
I agree with that.
But again, there's just something nice about vinyl that's more intangible, than the audio quality.
Yeah, it's the experience for sure. And I mean, the thing is, there's no level playing field, because just because Bob over here says, "Oh, vinyl's what sounds great," and Jimmy over here says, "Oh, my CD sounds good," he could have a $10,000 stereo system at home, great CD player, subwoofer, EQs, all that kind of stuff. And the guy that's saying it's got the record player is playing one of those little suitcase things that got plastic USB speakers, and so there's no level playing field. You have to be testing something. That's like judging a band against a band.
Yeah, it's really hard to compare apples to apples.
Yeah,
it's really, and there's so much snake oil and mythology in audio that it's just and a lot of people get taken advantage of, I think.
I agree on that
stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, subject.
Very cool. I'm going to jump back to the chat real quick, and I'm going to come back with another quick Van Halen question, too. We've got some good people over in the chat here as well, too. So Ron Pad just jumping in saying, hey. Let me see here. Frank McNeil commenting on Poison Ivy. My better half here has been ill lately, so I was just wishing some positive thoughts there. Greg Walker's joining, saying hello, Eric and Poison Ivy. Carlos Santon, happy Friday, everyone. Let me see here. MB215, what's up, everyone? Missed the last couple live shows, but I'm back in the saddle again. Nice thing is the shows, you can replay them back, which is good. Live is always fun because you get to ask some live questions, which is cool. Sam VH5150, my good buddy from Los Angeles, is joining. And Frank was having some video quality issues. It was hanging for a little bit, but apparently we're all good. Blackie DH is jumping in saying hello. Let me see here to see if anyone I missed. I scrolled a little too fast there. Oh yes, James says always smell the record when you get it. Yeah, still do.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
I mean, there's so many there's all these details. Even like when you hold it up to the light, the oil would reflect.
Yes. Yeah.
There'll be rainbows just all the,
Yeah.
Because, and also at the time there weren't all these distractions. Your Facebook wasn't.
Chiming. I know. Text messaging.
You get home from school. It's like, well, I could watch the 13 channels on the TV,
That's all you got, yep.
or
if you're lucky.
And I had, a few records, and I just sit and play, and it was just, I don't know. I don't want to wax too nostalgic, but
no, I know what you're saying, and I'm certainly not trying to promote the vinyl as a way to go. I'm rediscovering it. I grew up like you did, loving it, but the thing is, what people, I really want to push it towards kids to at least try it, because what's so cool about it is the fact that, number one, we get our liner notes, we get all those things. You get to see who, if you're the Van Halen fan, you can see who produced it, who the second engineer was, and before you're done reading it, I guarantee you, before you're done reading those liner notes, your record's going to be over, and you've already flipped it once, and it's like, wow, and you got something out of that.
Yeah, I have to say, there's something that for me personally, also, because I'm such a behind-the-scenes guy in general, that it's really kind of, I think it's tragic that credits have pretty much disappeared. I mean, there's really no... Yes, if you're watching something on YouTube and it's, written in the blurb there, but the credits, on records used to be, typically quite... voluminous, and you'd see exactly who produced what and who played the guitar on this and who played the bass on this and all of that kind of stuff, and who did the artwork,
Exactly.
There really is no, you don't see that on iTunes.
No, you don't.
It's like the idea of credits has been lost, so one of the problems, with I think the current, this is one of many things, but is that there's this kind of distancing. It's like there's a wall between the listener and the music, in the sense that you don't connect with how it was done.
Yeah, real disconnection. I agree with that.
Connect with the people that were doing it, and it's it's just unfortunate. It's not really fair, because basically, then the public simply has this impression that whoever's on the cover did everything, right?
That's right. Yeah, and there's a lot of people behind that front.
And that's rarely the case. Well, it accrues to the benefit of the featured artist, but everyone behind the scenes is kind of given short shrift, I think, in terms of in the public eye, and that most people, I think, when they would play records. Back when you'd play records, and even to some extent CDs. I mean, it was, smaller, but, still there. You'd
Mm-hmm.
pull the insert out and see similar stuff. But it was really fun at front and center when it was on vinyl.
I agree. And what's nice
But
with the labels are now they're giving you digital downloads with the vinyl, so they can cater to both avenues. They know you're going to spin this on your turntable. They know you want to take it in your car or go to the gym with it. So that's pretty cool. That's a smart move on their part. I mean, record labels are desperate for sales as it is, so it's obviously a good move on their part.
the funny thing is that I think I went to sell some of my old vinyl because it was just sitting in the attic,
Mm-hmm.
And the guy that ran the store I took it to, he said, because I was talking to him, and he said, the truth is that this is really sad, but he said most people that buy my records from me don't play them.
Oh,
They
wow.
just
Collect them. Yeah, just collect them.
So I don't know. I mean, they buy the record, but they probably listen to it on iTunes.
Yeah. Just to have it, just so they have it, so they can put it on the wall or hang it up on the frame. Some people do that. I mean, hey, you're buying the record. That's cool.
But some of these records go for thousands of dollars.
I know. Yeah.
So it's become a collector's fetish thing, as much as anything else.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You mentioned Trevor Rabin earlier, and James from Ottawa says, just like Trevor Rabin, guitarist for Yes, became a film score musician. And I think that's actually a perfect time to jump over to the question I have for you. Like I love watching movies. It's one of my big things I do. I don't watch a lot of TV shows. I watch a few TV shows, but I love movies. And the score will make a bad movie good. It'll make a great movie phenomenal. The score is very, very important, and I think a lot of times I could be very well wrong here, but I think sometimes more important than the cinematography, because you connect emotionally to audio. I find, at least I'm a musician, but that's maybe why.
Absolutely.
Okay, so good. So on the right track there. When did you get into it, and how did you get into it? And we'll talk a little bit about both, because you do film and video games, which a lot of us have a big passion into. Tell us a little bit about your career in that.
Well, I guess you could say I started again when I was working in that big studio where I worked on Jason's record.
Mm-hmm.
We had some projects in there. That studio featured an early digital audio workstation called the Synclavier.
Yes.
And Synclavier was a very, very expensive thing that only, mostly just the rich rock stars had. They only made a few hundred of these things. And there was one there. I mean, Michael Jackson had a couple of them. Sting had one. Stevie Wonder had one. So you get the idea that...
Yeah, they're not cheap.
They cost, in the six figures.
Wow.
What now, everybody's got it in their laptop.
Yeah.
Okay. But at that time, late 1980s, early 90s, that was the machine. I mean, if you, and so a lot of people, a lot of composers that were working in film and television were using those machines as well. And so we did a little bit of that. I mean, we did some TV commercials, and he had done a film called The Hunger. With David Bowie.
Oh, nice.
And that may have been the first film to have been done with the Synclavier, or at least in part. And so I really got bitten by it. I really enjoyed that process. Again, I never really thought, of course, I've talked about how I studied piano all these years, but I knew I was never going to be a really great piano player. I mean, I really was more of a sculptor.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I sort of thought of myself more like a George Martin. I'm not comparing myself quantitatively to George Martin in any way, shape, or form, but in terms of the scope of what he did, that was sort of how I saw myself as production and overseeing music in the studio and sculpting it in that way. And so I I was assisting while all these things were being done, and we had other composers came through. I think J.P. Robinson came through. he had been the keyboard player for a band called Brand X.
Okay.
It was Phil Collins' band. It was a fusion band, but he was starting to do film scores. So there's a film, Robin Williams film called Cadillac Man. That we did there.
Great movie.
Yeah. And so I kind of got, I got to watch him work, and he was a phenomenal talent. My God, he was a great keyboard player. I should say still is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, this is really cool. I mean, this is what I want to do. I mean, it sort of started from there. And then when I left, I got hooked up with another composer because I knew the synclavier really well. That actually led to my getting a lot of work because,
of course,
not very many people knew how to run those things
or had them, right?
I ended up working for another composer named Gary Malkin, and I did. He was doing a TV show called Unsolved Mysteries, which was
watched it a lot as a kid,
yeah,
and adult.
That was. It really is one of the longest running TV shows in the history of television, and went up, I think, from 1987 to 2002,
mm-hmm.
And ended up on 3 different networks. And there was a whole team of people working on that. I think there was 4 people. I was one of 4 people. And I sort of gradually started doing segments. Unsolved Mysteries it had the format kind of like 60 Minutes,
mm-hmm.
Where there'd be 3 segments in a show. So we'd get these segments to do. And by the time the last 2 years of the show, I think it was on Lifetime Channel by then, and I was basically the only one doing it. Everybody else had moved on to other things, so
right.
I did the last 2 years myself. And I loved doing television. I mean, in some ways, it's like the closest thing to a day job, that a composer can have.
Yeah,
because you have this thing
consistency.
once a week.
Yeah, that's right.
And a brand is established, even unlike film scoring, it's far less micromanaging because you sort of establish the brand of what you do. They don't have time, to micromanage you.
No.
So I remember, and it was a little bit before QuickTime movies, so I would get tapes, and they'd send the tape up, and I'd have basically 3 days or something to do a show. And the first 2 days, I just pace around and kind of go, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. But I stay up all night.
Now you watching it a lot of times to get the feel.
A lot of coffee,
Yeah.
But I just loved the hell out of doing that. It was such a fun show to do, and they didn't bother me. I'd send it down, and I'd never heard a word. It would just go on TV.
Wow.
Couple days later, and I got to thinking, well, either I'm really good or they just don't give a shit.
One or the other.
Or both. But you sort of establish a sound, and they just kind of trust you. So that's the beautiful thing about doing television.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get into it, So I really enjoyed that. Film's a little different because, and I haven't done much in the way of big screen film, but I've done lots of documentaries.
Okay.
And it's just more micromanaged,
Yeah.
It's somebody's baby, and you're just, you're just part of that process. You're just one cog in that wheel. Usually you're almost the last thing to happen on the film because they got to get the film done more or less before you can do your job. And
that's right.
Of course, they've run out of money by then,
Yeah, so we got to do this fast and make it sound jazzy. We'll be good.
You're really so that's another issue that I think a lot of composers have to deal with is that by the time they get to they've overspent their budgets, and now they're gonna go, well, can you
Yeah, how many corners can you cut for me here, buddy?
I buy dinner,
Yeah. But think of the exposure you're gonna get. Do it for free. You're gonna get all this exposure.
I'm kind of saying, people die from exposure.
I know. Trust me, I'm definitely not promoting that. I'm being sarcastic because that's what they always say.
So anyway, film is different. It's also very gratifying, but it's in a different way, and you really have to you have to have your ego in the right place because it's a really tricky balance because on the one hand you need to call forth your emotional response to what's going on because your job is to steer people's emotions, and underline the emotional subtext. I mean, like, you can see a scene and probably go, okay, this is more or less the emotion that is trying to be conveyed. But of course, Aaron Copland, the famous 20th century composer, he was also a film composer. He did a couple of films, and I think he did a seminar once where he played a film, and then it was like somebody running from something, and he played one music that was quite serious, and then he put some comedy music over it.
Like Benny Hill kind of thing.
Yeah, and your perception of it is completely different.
Yeah, of course, that's right.
So it is an important job, and you have to, and sometimes, of course, your perception of what something should say emotionally is not necessarily the same as what the director thinks.
Yeah, just because the director's eye says this, you may not follow that.
Yeah, so it's really, it is not for the faint of heart, because you do have to be vulnerable emotionally, and to be able to call that out of your, and at the same time you have to be ready for them to just say, no, doesn't work, start again.
That's right. And not check your ego at the door because it's up to them.
You pour everything into it, and then in a snap of fingers, it's like, no, start again, do something else.
Yeah.
And you just turn right on a dime and go, yeah, you're right, let's do it this way.
Yeah.
And so forth. That
means more work.
So that's the challenge of doing film.
Yeah.
And it's that balance between not being able to not care and see the larger picture, that you sort of see yourself in proper perspective. It's not about you as an artist.
No, that's right. Yeah, that's for sure. That can be applied to graphic artists as well too. Same idea.
Yeah. I think graphic artists could probably relate to what I'm saying.
Yep. When you have your heart invested and you love it, it's not really, at the end of the day, it's not exactly what you think. I find usually the more you love it, the less the client likes it. The more the client likes it, you like it less, as long as the client's happy at the end. I could think that's and you're getting a paycheck.
Or there's situations where you talk, and that's another thing, is like, well, I talk to the producer and send it to the producer, and the producer loves it.
Mm-hmm, but somebody else doesn't.
The photographer loves it, and then now you're going, okay, we're good. But then the director hates it.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how many people before liked it.
Yeah, the problem is, and films are also the weird amalgam of democracy and dictatorship, and it's really tricky, but I think it's part of the job to be able to navigate those waters, so it's much more than just being able to write music.
I agree. On the flip side of all this, now with technology we have with video games, we go back, like you and I probably played the Mario Brothers and all those kind of things, and they have Pongs and all those kind of things back in the day, the Ataris, Space Invaders. Yeah. We went from FM modulated kind of blips and bleeps to 8-bit, kind of MIDI type music, and now we've got full orchestral scores.
Absolutely.
How's that opened up doors for you? I know you've done some game scoring as well too.
Little bit. I haven't done any like these big epic games, like first-person shooter type games, but I've done. Probably a lot of people have heard of The Sims.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I did a lot of work on The Sims, especially The Sims 2 a number of years ago.
Okay.
It was a lot of fun. It's different because there's a lot of permutations you have to deal with, and oftentimes you have to do everything in the key of C, because these events are going to be playing over each other.
Okay.
Right? And if you do one thing in the key of C and one in the key of D flat, it's going to create this clash.
A huge clash.
So some of the job is trying to create something interesting without modulating too much, into other keys like that.
I think that's us on the receiving end of playing the games. Never think of that. We don't think of that. Okay, well, you're doing all these different things. There's different layers.
I have done some casino stuff, like slot machine games.
Okay.
constantly. And the dirty secret is that if you walk into a casino, every one of those slot machines is playing in the key of C because they don't want clashes.
Yeah, I can see that.
They don't want people,
It rubs you the wrong way, you leave.
Got 500 slot machines all playing at the same time. So they all play, everything's in the key of C.
So that being said, here's a little tip for the guitar players. So you got a lot of the guitar players out there playing casino gigs. You left your Boss tuner at home, whatever. Just listen there and tune up your guitar. You hit the third fret on the A string.
The slot machines.
Awesome. Well, you can tune to a dial tone. At least here in North America, in Canada, the dial tone is an F. So I mean, for people that actually have a wired phone, I should say. That's an F. So there you go. There's a couple of tuning facts that we probably never would have thought of tonight. That's hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, some, and actually, the other thing that was, I did for The Sims. There was a, this is about sort of creating your own little society, right? Mm-hmm. And creating characters that interact with each other and do various things. And one of the things that I did for them was when the Sims are singing karaoke.
Okay.
I think 3 or 4 of us got the job to do some songs where the Sims get up and play karaoke, and there's different skill levels. Mm-hmm. So I think I must have delivered like 14,000 files or something like that to the company, and we. But the best part of it was having singers come in and sing badly.
Yes, and on purpose.
I mean, we had people, acting drunk and burping and farting, and being off key, and we were just rolling on the floor.
I bet that'd make the job fun.
The bad singers,
Yeah.
And then you'd have to take the same song and they'd get gradually better, as they would increase in skill level, So there are, just things like that, that where you have a situation that has multiple permutations, and you have to take that scenario and treat it in a variety of different ways. So games just have all these multi dimensions to them, and whereas a film or a TV show is just this linear experience.
Yeah.
It doesn't go anywhere. It just goes. You're being directed through the whole thing.
That's right. Whereas a game, you're controlling the matter. Your actions will determine the outcome, and that is music as well.
Exactly. So they're all. It's just the gaming thing is just. It's a different way of approaching it, and there's different rules. And I frankly I prefer doing TV and film. Mm-hmm. It could just because it's less. It's just less cerebral, I can just focus on how I feel about something.
Certainly, yeah. Emotions a little easier at the realm there.
With spreadsheets, when I'm working on a game and things like that. It's just, it's a little more of a distraction from the creative part, from me,
Yeah, and you also not necessarily, you probably don't game much now, so I mean, you don't have probably a feel, or do you game? Are you a gamer?
It's so funny, no, I'm really not a gamer at all.
Right.
This is so. I think a lot of the people that I've known that have done video game music don't play video games either. It reminds me of I heard recently that John Williams has never seen Star Wars.
Really?
He's never sat down and watched it. That's what he said.
It could be true.
That's what I heard, and I can kind of identify with that.
Certainly,
because it's a job, you move on, and
Yeah.
He felt he'd seen it enough times.
Well, whatever he's done, we'll just thank him for it, and we're happy. Whether he's watching now, we don't really care what he's done. Yeah. We know what his music is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can kind of identify with that. I don't play video games.
Okay, that's good to know. They can certainly consume your life. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially with, like you say, like Sims and things like that, things that you get to partake in that are kind of a mock on reality, you tend to get.
Yeah, you hear stories about people playing World of Warcraft and
for like 3 days, 4 days straight. In
their basement, and,
Yep. Wearing a diaper so they don't have to get off the couch.
don't smell very good.
I know. Yeah, that's right. They don't have too many girlfriends, I'm sure. I could jump back to the chat for a real quick set. We'll come back with a couple wrap-up questions on Jason Becker, and also if you want, do you feel like doing any playing for us at all today? I know you got a keyboard. No, you want to stay away from it?
Well, maybe we'll see.
Okay, we'll see. We'll see how the flow goes. Les Bellins joining says, hello, rockers. Ben, I pronounced his name wrong. He says, my last name is pronounced Nushatka. I hope...
Hi, Ben. Hey, Ben, how are you?
You know Ben? Am I saying it right?
Ben Nushaka, I think.
Nushaka. Okay, thank you. I think he might have been the fellow that contacted me through the Facebook page and just asked how we could tune in and watch live tonight. It may be him, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, he knows you, so thank you for joining, Ben, and we greatly appreciate it.
Ben was very generous to contribute to the campaign as well.
Oh, good. Thank you, Ben. Fantastic. And once again, as a reminder, in the link of this description down below, there is a link to the Indiegogo campaign, and there's different tiers you can contribute, and those certain rewards that you get for that as well, too. The main reward is just the fact that you're supporting Jason's album, and I know he and everyone involved in that, including Dan, will be very appreciative of that to see this album see the light of day. But the description is down below in the link there, so grab that and do what you can. If not, just make yourself aware of it as well too, and even that is appreciated. Let me see here. Darren Moore is a good friend of mine from Michigan, says, hello everyone, incredible guest tonight. I do agree with you, Darren. Home Recording Made Easy saying, hey everyone. He's doing really good things over on his YouTube channel as well, Gary Davlin. And for recording people, he's got some good tips on his channel, which is great. Carlos Santa and Floppy Disk, the horror. Here's a quick thing. I remember I've been using Photoshop since long before Adobe owned it. Remember it was Aldus Photo Styler or whatever. And when I installed the very first versions of Photoshop, it was about 7 to 15 different floppy disks, and I do not regret that. So you know what that's all about. Back in the day.
Yeah. Boy, do I remember the floppies.
Yep. You try to explain that to a child today. Well, what does one of those hold? I said, see this graphic on your phone? Let's take 1 pixel out of that graphic. That's what it held. You know?
Yeah.
That's right. Carlos Santon, floppy disk. Yeah, I mentioned that. Lots of bad experiences with those. Don't miss them. Yeah. Who likes them? And where if you store them in a metal filing cabinet or you store them next to whatever. I mean, nowadays you can. It's crazy. Remember when the first 1 gigabyte hard drive come out? It was like a 5 1/4 size, a solid steel chassis like a 350 engine in a car, and it cost about $1,500. And
well, you know. Remember I was mentioning that machine, the Synclavier.
Yes.
It held 32. We had, at least at one point, we had the biggest machine, and we had 32 megabytes in it, and RAM was $4,000 per megabyte. Oh,
and now it's like 50 cents a meg. I know. Isn't that crazy? 32 meg. Yeah.
Yeah.
What can you store in that? 4 resumes.
And I'm thinking, I mean, I have 64 gigabytes in my Mac, and it's just, if somebody had said to me at that time, that you're going to have a computer with 64 gigabytes and have, 8 terabytes on a hard drive, I would have said.
Yeah, you burn them at the stake because you're a witch. You're a witch. Well, I mean,
then they said, well, that's going to be 30 years from now. Well, I said, well, maybe.
Yeah. But if you think of it too, and I think a lot of us need some restraint too, because just because we have technology today that allows us to do what we want to do. Here's an example. You and I are both using a Mac. I mean, most people don't have the stuff that you have behind your Mac, but let's just say you and I are using the same Mac, and all we've got is Logic and a little interface, right?
Yeah.
Now we can, as long as your Mac is fairly powerful, we can lay 24 tracks down, 32 tracks, a guitar, and all that kind of stuff. But
living room, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, but should we? Just because we can.
Should we? Oh God, I mean, what a question. I mean, sure. I mean, the thing that happened with the music business, which is a lot of people see as fairly dystopian. I mean, or at the very least, it's become this fragmented place. Every man for himself, every person, I should say, every person for him or herself. And, people have really leveraged that. I know that a lot of artists have really tried to make the best of what the situation is, to work with, to sort of Aikido the situation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Steve Vai is a good example of that. I mean, I just saw a video of him talking about the new music business and how he's sort of leveraged himself into making that work for him.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you know, he does have some advantages in having lived in the old music business, but
Yes.
still, he, you know, I mean, you have a choice. I mean, you can cry about it, or you can try to work within, you know, the bounds of what it is now. So it's a very interesting place. I mean, I'm in this, I sort of, I do okay because I'm not trying to be an artist, you know.
Yeah.
I'm in service to other artists, really, you know.
There's nothing to prove, like in other words.
Yeah, and so you know, people pay me to do that, you know. But I think it, you know, I don't envy artists now. You know,
Yeah,
it's
I know.
a tough road, and even someone like Jason, you know, in order to make a record, there's no record, you know, no record company, you know,
Beating down the door.
Yeah, I mean, if any a record company might help you with promotion
And distribution
and things like that, but I don't think that many people are buying CDs anymore.
No.
You know, so now it's, you know, what deal have you made with Pandora and Spotify and iTunes and things like that, and what can they do for you in terms of sync licenses and
Yes.
all this kind of stuff. So I don't know. I mean, it's a bit out of my domain because I just sort of focus on trying to get music done for artists, and then I move on to the next thing, you know. But obviously, Jason is very special to me, and
Yes.
And we have a very special relationship. So.
I'm curious, just from the things I read about Jason, and you hear people talk about watching different interviews and things like that too. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think I have a feel on this. Obviously, you know, Jason's releasing this album. You know, he'll make a couple bucks here and there, but I think he has a story that he's trying to. It's a story that's untold, maybe, and he needs to get that out. Is that correct?
Well, I think that Jason realizes on some level that this record is not just about him.
Of course.
You know, and this really goes back to, I think, some of what has kept him alive. I mean, there's many reasons for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not the least of which is his incredible support system, but his fans. You know, and that he, I think, whether he realizes it or not, and I'm sure he does, is that people are counting on him to show the world that someone who can only move his eyes
Mm-hmm.
can make a record.
Has a lot of music soul left.
Yeah, and this really is, you know, I mean, people talk about, I read, you know, when I look at his videos on YouTube, I see all kinds of people making some pretty crazy statements about, you know, Jason, and everything from, you know, that he's dead, or to how he does things that are not correct. But I will say that this record, he really, most of what's on this record, he created from start to finish using his eyes.
Wow.
Note by note.
Yeah.
Now, I have helped a lot, you know.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
With the arrangements, but in essence, you know, this really is. You can look at perspective, and it had, you know, there were. I mean, he did some of these things by poking around on a MIDI keyboard, when he could still, you know, do that.
Function, yeah.
Yeah, and there was a lot of his old guitar playing. That was a mixture. On Collection, there were 3 new songs, and River of Longing, both versions of River of Longing were basically, that was based on his a guitar performance of his that we had dredged up and had put new arrangements on it, had other guitar players play on. There was one song, Electric Prayer for Peace, which he had written with his eyes at that time, that one song. But this record, he really has created with his eyes.
Wow.
And it is a remarkable achievement. And I can't even imagine how much patience it takes for him. You know, he's got to just, you know, his eye system is pretty fast. I could maybe estimate that it's maybe 20% the speed of talking, something like that.
That's pretty fast.
10 to 20% the speed is that we are talking, because he'll start to spell a word, and you know how like when you type in
Autocorrect or auto fills itself out. Yeah.
So it's human autofill.
Mm-hmm.
You sometimes in context you just know that when he's within the context of a sentence he starts putting in a couple letters. You know what it is, so you just say the word and then you move on.
We got to see a little bit of that in the movie, in the documentary.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So every time I work with him, I'm sitting down across from him, and there's somebody there interpreting. I'm embarrassed to say that I don't know. I don't know his
system
language.
yet.
Yeah, it's just that it's because I just have never had to learn it.
Right.
And it in some ways it would be a distraction, because I need to focus on what's.
Yeah,
in front
you have
of me.
one job to do, an important one.
Yeah.
Yep.
So but my point is that with one or two exceptions on this record, most of this record was, including long orchestral pieces, were written by Jason with his eye language, and that is, and so to go back to your question, that what he is demonstrating, is going to be so inspirational to so many people.
Yeah.
That he knows he has that job to do. It's not just that he has music to get on, and God knows I know he's been wanting to get music out of his head, into the public, for a long time. And the last record we did was in 2008,
Yeah, it's been a while ago. That's, yeah.
Well, we released Blackberry Jams and Raspberry Jams, but those were just old recordings of his.
Mm-hmm.
But compositionally, is completely new material, and that he has written this way, and that's the achievement here. And it's really, I've been working on this record for a couple of years now, and I still, every time I go over there, I still marvel at it.
Yeah.
I have to say.
Yeah.
So he's just an inspiration to so many people, and in many dimensions, for his creativity, for his attitude, in the fact that he has, I'm not sure I want to say overcome, because obviously he's not cured of this disease.
Of course.
He learned to reframe it. What was it? He said, what I think it was on an interview a few years ago. He said that when someone said, "Well, how can you deal with this? It's so hard." And he said, "Well, just imagine you're sitting in a chair all day and hot ladies take care of your every need." I mean,
yeah. Well, what got me? What he said. I mean, it goes to show you this guy has humor. He should be a comedian. I mean, he really is. He's got that in him. But and obviously you must know Craig Rendles very well too.
Yeah.
So when Craig and Jason were on at New Year's, I forget what the actual context of the thing was, but we're talking gear. We're really talking gear at this point, and was looking at the Hurricane guitar, and somehow or another the conversation come up. So like I said, well, it's got a giant nut, and of course, what's Jason say? That's what she said. And I mean,
anytime he has the opportunity to sexualize anything, he will do it.
I just gotten around the fact that, okay, Jason Becker's on the show. Okay. So look at that wow movement is being processed. And then it comes up with, that's what she said. And I'm like, okay, way to go, Jason. I have no idea what I'm going to say next. You know what I mean? Nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and he can get away. The thing is, he can get away with that in a way that a lot of other people, that we couldn't.
He's Jason Becker.
Because he's Jason Becker, and because in his situation, it's like everybody knows. It's like, what is he going to do?
I know.
So,
yeah. You don't know where it's going to go.
He can just get away with stuff, and it's great. I love it.
That's right. I've got two last questions for you. I just want to go back to the chat real quick for a second. There's one person I didn't mention. Vinny Romano's joining us. I don't think I mentioned him. And Carlos Santin was also mentioning as well too, spending lots of evenings of spinning vinyl. And there's one of the questions, your friend Ben there, he's talking, he says Fair Warning is his favorite Van Halen album. He got it when he was 11. It's kind of a staple thing I have to ask on the show. It's just, I feel I do this every time. It's a Van Halen time capsule. We're going to lock away one record and 100 years from now, we're going to open it up and say, this, folks of Earth, this was what Van Halen was. What album do you put in there?
Okay. So this is a great question. I would have to say, I see sort of I see Van Halen as two bands.
Okay.
For obvious reasons.
Yep. Singers.
And yeah, and so like the obviously Van Halen one would be one of them. I have to decide, but 5150, there's so many great things on that. What was the
Why Can't This Be Love?
no, it was
Summer Nights.
right.
Yep.
When it's I love playing that because I almost thought did he write this on the keyboard because it's so fun to play on the keyboard.
It seems like it, right? Yeah, and he's using the Steinberger Transstrum on that.
And then there's also this one. Which one is this one?
Dreams. There's Dreams is a good one.
I can't remember the name of it. It's this.
Yep, that's Dreams.
That one. It's
Beautiful.
called Dreams.
Yep.
Yeah. That one. I think the reason why I like 5150 is because there's a soft spot. I have a soft spot in my heart for the keyboard oriented songs.
Of course you would. Of course.
Right. So I guess it's a toss up between those two. But I guess if I had to choose one, it would be Van Halen 1 because it was such because I think it really changed how guitar players saw the instrument, and it changed so much about. Nothing was different after that. I can't say quite the same thing about 5150. So in terms of just his influence on musical culture, I got to give the nod to Van Halen 1.
Yeah. I do like the fact, though, that you said 5150, and I applaud you on that because for two reasons. One, no one said that yet on the show, and that's not a good thing or a bad thing. They've gone with a lot of other choices, 84, Mine's Fair Warning, like Ben was saying, things like that. But it's really, really cool because the fact that you didn't just go with your gut feeling on the first time you heard Van Halen, because just because your first time you hear them doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be your long-lasting effect. And 5150 does have, well, as a keyboard, it's keyboard driven all over the place. But they got really creative there too, so it has some merit. So there's nothing wrong with that answer. It's a great answer.
It would be hard. There's a lot of individual songs I liked on other records. I love Panama.
Yep.
But I actually, in fairness, it's not that great for me to give you an answer, and I'll tell you why. Because I only ever owned the first two albums, and the rest of it was just what I heard on the radio. I never bought albums after that, so I'm not even sure I'm completely familiar with every song.
Just the hits that you'd hear on FM.
But 5150, I don't know. There were a lot of really great songs on that record for me, that I just liked. So
yeah, I just got that one on vinyl yesterday. I'm going to spin it tonight after the show. The boy and I are going to listen to it. Yep.
Fair enough.
$10. It was used at the store. Got it for $10. Got the liner notes, which is good. Unfortunately, someone wrote all kinds of key signatures and chord changes on it, but who knows? Yeah. But I'll check that out. But that's a good answer, and I like that. My last question I'm going to ask you, we're going to flip it back to Jason again. What have you learned from him, or if you've been working with him for 2.5 decades, what if some things you've learned from him? It could be musical, it could be spiritual, it could be anything. What's some takeaways that people could take away from the show tonight, what you've learned from working with a great man like Jason?
Yeah, God. Well, so many things. Perspective, coincidence, and I think that our having that discussion was part of how that album got its name, actually.
Yeah.
God, so many things. I mean, humility for one thing. I mean, when I say perspective, I mean, I can't. It's harder for me to say I've had a bad day.
I agree with that 100%. Yep.
I mean, and I said it's a little delicate for me to say that because I don't want to imply that Jason has a horrible quality of life.
No, of course not.
It's just, I'm sure he would love nothing more than to get up and walk around and start playing again. But that said, he has built a life around who he is and his limitations. But still, I don't think anyone here in the audience would want to trade places with his physical condition.
No.
And so it is. If I feel like complaining about something, that helps. It helps me to think. I don't have a right to complain.
That's
because that'd be good.
Yeah.
So there's perspective on that. Humility. Jason's had to learn humility, I think, and because he was treated as the king of the guitar world. And
yeah, he was at a very young age.
Yeah, he had to sort of deal with that transition. Very traumatic. So I think he has something to teach about humility too.
Yeah, not just music.
Not just music, in all areas of life. And also, I will tell you that Jason has taught me a lot about music. Jason does things, I'm this. And I go back to my George Martin comment, because I sort of identify with George Martin, and he was asked if he could have written a Beatles song, and he said no, I had too much schooling. And Jason does things that are totally against the rules, that I learned in school. You don't do parallel fifths and unless learn in basic harmony. Don't do this. He does these strange chord changes, that where he jumps around in ways that I would never have thought of doing, and he makes it work.
Yeah,
we really are quite simpatico in terms of our what we like and how we think. I think in general we agree 80-90% of the time. When we rarely have any major disagreements when it comes to working on his music. But oftentimes when we do disagree, or when I think I feel very strongly about something, very often I come back after he's been sort of insistent, and I come back and say, I'll be damned if you weren't right about that. He's a deep guy. I mean, he really understands music on a deep level, and it would be difficult for me to verbalize, exactly, exact examples of that. But there are many situations where I want to do this note or I want to do this chord here, and after a while I sort of get why he wanted to do it the other way, and it makes sense. I realized it actually made sense, and it took me some time to get that. So so in all of those ways, he has taught me many things. He's also introduced me to. I never thought much of Bob Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to sit here and profess that, but I have completely changed my tune about that. He showed me a lot of stuff about Bob Dylan that I now have a lot more respect for, and some other artists as well. So, in many ways, Jason has taught me. He's taught me about music. He's taught me about life. He's taught me to have a different perspective on things, and I have endless appreciation for it.
See, that's the thing. That's what I was hoping to get out of you, and I got everything and more. It wasn't just about music; it's life and everything. And I think we are all gifted to have him in our lives. I mean, none of us are friends like you are with him. I mean, he has his circle of friends, but as people looking from the outside in, we are very lucky and gifted to. He's very inspiring. I think he's great for children. I think they should almost make his history part of the curriculum in school. For music, for persevering, for the setting no boundaries on yourself, no limits. You can be whatever you want to be. Truly a champion.
Truly champion. Yeah. He really is.
Yeah, I want to thank him as well, and his family and his team today for sharing our event. It was very nice that he promoted it before the show here, and it's a big help as well too. Very, very thankful. And I want to thank you for sure for joining us tonight. I guess probably for people that want to find out more about you. You know what? Just before we go, we have the person we just mentioned as well. Craig Rendels is jumping in right now. He says, "Hey guys, this is great. I had to check in for this one." So there we go. Our buddy Craig.
I love his Bones guitar. He made this incredible Bones guitar for Jason. It's hanging on the wall.
Oh, has he got it?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Craig is quite a talented artisan as well.
He's a creative artisan, and he's a monster guitar player.
Yes.
It's crazy. I see these guys like Jason and Craig and all these other friends that we have, and there's days where the old me would want to say quit and go drive a cab, but I find it inspiring, and I take it the other way. It fuels me, and it fuels all of us. That's why we have to look at people like that. Don't get mad. Don't be jealous and put on hate. Fuel that passion and make yourself better.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. I'm gonna say goodbye to you off the air, so don't go anywhere yet.
Okay.
Craig Reynolds is saying hi to you personally, saying hey Dan, and I'm gonna get Craig back on the show very, very soon. I've been promising this, and I'm not sure if you know his mutual and my mutual friend Jay Palmer. You may know him.
No.
He's a phenomenal guitarist from over in Brighton. So it'll probably be the two of them at a time. So I'll let you know when that happens, and you'll see some good guitar playing with those two guys. And I'm just going to be the facilitator, and I'm not going to play in that one. But good people. But Craig, I love him. Got to meet him personally at NAMM, and been friends ever since. So, and he says, "Thanks, guys. I'm humbled." And he's a very, very non-egotistical. This guy is as good as it gets. I love him. Mm-hmm. Good guy. So listen, folks, thank you so much for joining Dan and I for this great broadcast. Please do me a favor and familiarize yourself with the Indiegogo campaign to crowdfund the album. The link is in the description below. Familiarize yourself with ALS. Do whatever you can to contribute, and just becoming familiar and aware is step number one. I'm still uneducated. I don't know a lot about it. I know a little bit about it. I need more education myself, which I will take that in. And we'll look forward to a great album from Jason coming up soon, from Jason and Dan. Some incredible guests. I'm just very, very happy to have you here, Dan. It's been a while in the making here, so happy to have you, and I will certainly extend an invitation for you to come back in the fall or winter if you feel up to it as well.
The honor is mine, and hopefully by then we'll be done and we can kind of recap the record as well.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. I'll buy a few copies, and if it's done at that time, I'll buy a few copies. I'll give them away as prizes here on the show. That'd be phenomenal.
Fantastic.
That's good. Okay, well, listen, everyone. You have a fantastic weekend. I'm going to say goodbye to Dan off the air, and I hope Dan and I were your warm-up band for the weekend. That's what we try to do here, warm you up for the weekend, warm up to show, whatever, and have a great weekend. Be safe out there, and especially if you're out there traveling, have a great weekend, and you can become anything you want. Just ask Jason Becker.
Absolutely. Ask Jason.
That's right. Take care, everyone. We'll see you real soon. I'm going to turn to the little man. He's going to tell us what his name is, when he's playing, and we'll see you real soon. Cheers.
My name is Eric, and I'm playing looking guitar.
Video production services provided by Design 39 Media. Visit design39media.com for all your website, photography, and video production needs.